About 1990, Barbed Wire Collectors of America, they're scattered all over the West, approximately 400 or 500 of them, and they wanted to establish a museum on a well-traveled route. And this building happened to be available, and of course, me living here knew about it, and it was empty. It had been a brassiere factory working 100 women for 20 years. And when they closed up, it moved area to Mexico, the building stayed empty for 20 years. So we made a deal with the city to lease the building and establish the Barbed Wire Museum. And that's how it began. And we opened in 1991. Barbed wire is a boundary, and it is a question of whether you fence in or fence out. If you're a rancher, you fence your cattle in, and if you're a farmer, you fence cattle away from your crops. Probably to most of the people watching, the most important thing is it keeps livestock off of our highways and roads and out of your yards in the city. So barbed wire is a boundary, it's a barrier, and it's cheap and economical to build, and it's very efficient. In fact, we say in Texas, a barbed wire fence is just as good as a Great Wall of China. If you cross it, the results will be the same. Disaster. Barbed wire actually didn't come about until about 1868 and 1870, right after the Civil War. When the survivors of the Civil War got back home in Texas, all our country was covered up with cattle, wild cattle. There was no fencing at that time. So there was a great need for a barrier to help fence property. Well, the first wires were made in blacksmith shop, mostly by cowboys and landowners to fence in their wife's garden or this sort of thing. And once it was established that it was okay, then of course everybody made their own barbed wire. I'm going to patent this and I'm going to get rich. But it all made by hand. Well, you just can't make very much barbed wire by hand. So as the barbed wire developed on, they used machines to build it. Well, it has to be a very simple design in order for a machine to build a wire. So that's all of a sudden then, even though there were 850 patents and we collect 2,000 kinds of wire, it finally boiled down to 20 or 30 wires that could be built by machine. And of course, as the Industrial Revolution came along and improved our machines and steel to make the wire from and coatings from the wire, all of that made barbed wire what it is today. Along with the development of barbed wire, of course, came the development of tools to handle it, because until then, nobody had ever handled something, and barbed wire is dangerous. The first barbed wires were very vicious, and immediately when cattle became injured from this, they immediately changed the wire back to where it was not near so vicious. In fact, most of the barbs today are actually loose on the wire, and if an animal hits it, it turns and won't cut or puncture. Well, you had to have tools to work this with, and the tighter you stretch it, the better it lasts. So stretchers, barbed wire cutters, barbed wire pliers, everything in the world that you can imagine was invented, along with probably cussing, probably developed rapidly from handling barbed wire, because you can't handle barbed wire without cussing a little. Original barbed wire was made on a coffee bean grinder. The cowboys would twist pieces of wire, and then it would be slipped on the main wire and fastened. So we built this machine to show how the barb was made. All barbs are on one wire, and of course barbed wire is two wires twisted together. So you put all of the barbs on one wire, and you've got your main wire, and then with this machine spins and twists the wire, and it makes the barb. And in the old days, you had to cut that off. You move the barb along wherever you want it on your main wire, and then you tap it to fasten it so it stays in place. So you put your various barbs on there, about so far apart. You bring it down, you hook it here, and you bring another wire in, and then you crank it and twist it. You come up with barbs about every 6 inches, and it's twisted. The twist holds the barb in place. Now these barbs twist on the wire so that when an animal hits it, it doesn't puncture and cut like it used to originally. So this is about as humane as you can make a wire, yet still be effective in controlling livestock.